Most people, they are misreading the internet computer right now as we speak. The debate is still focused on token price, burn rates, and short-term crypto narratives, while a larger shift may be developing underneath the surface. And that shift sits at the intersection of cloud infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and enterprise adoption. We're going to examine why cloud engines, AI narrative architecture, and ICP's integration strategy could be changing the way internet computer should be valued, and why some investors increasingly see it as core infrastructure rather than just a simple other blockchain. This is very important here today because for years, the market has evaluated internet computer the same way it evaluates most crypto projects. How many users does it have? How much value is locked up on the network? And also, how is the token actually performing? Yeah, those are reasonable in hindsight, and obviously reasonable questions, but they may no longer be the most important ones to answer because artificial intelligence is creating a new infrastructure race, a race that's centered around ownership, security, memory, identity, trust, government, and verification. And that's where the internet computer begins to look very different, completely different. Because while many blockchain networks, they are competing to become, yes, financial systems, ICP appears to be pursuing something broader. We're talking a complete infrastructure stack capable of hosting, securing, governing, executing, auditing, and preserving intelligent, decentralized applications. This is a big difference here. Now, this is what most people are missing right now. If that vision is correct, and then ICP may not ultimately be competing against other blockchains, it could be competing for a role inside the future cloud and AI infrastructure market itself. And the arrival of cloud engines may be one of the clearest signals and signs that this transition is beginning. It's starting. Quick pause for a second. This breakdown today is actually helping you see the market differently. And you want deeper research behind these moves. That's exactly what we do inside the Patreon community that we have started many months ago. Every week we break down the macro trends, crypto flows, risk signals, and the setups we're personally watching before the actual crowd catches on. We're talking moves in crypto, we're talking moves in AI infrastructure, looking at the bottlenecks, second order effects. We're looking at the layers within scarcity infrastructure that most investors are not looking at. Several months, we've had Marvel that we've called from 140. The stock went well above 300. And also, we do deep analysis. Sometimes also the strong ideas can avoid you making mistakes. And that's where the membership pays for itself. We have nearly 600 active traders and investors in the community that are already inside the Crypto Republic Desk monthly. And I want to welcome all the new members that have been joining us lately. We also have our weekly Zoom calls where me and my partner, we pretty much unravel what is happening in the entire macro scene, where you can ask me questions and answers, and I can clarify any question that you may have in regards to where everything is going. And the goal is simple here. It's to stay informed, to stay prepared and position ourselves ahead of the major market moves and shifts that are in front of us. And if you want that access to the full research, private updates, and members-only insights, check out the link below. I will put up a pinned comment. And yeah, now let's get back to the data. Okay. The clear thing to look at here today that we're going to discuss, and that is very, very important for years, crypto investors, they have evaluated projects through a familiar lens. And they always say, can it process transactions? Can it support DeFi? Can it actually scale? Can it compete with Ethereum? Can it attract users? Yep, those questions matter. Yes, they're important, but they may not be the most important questions anymore in all of the sphere, because the technology landscape is changing at a rapid pace beneath our feet. Artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming the dominant technological force of this decade and will be for the next decade. Governments are investing billions. Corporations are investing hundreds of billions. And that capex ain't stopping. Enterprise industries are reorganizing around AI, and that raises a fundamental question in all of this. Where will all of this intelligence live? Think about it. Where will it be actually governed? Where will it store memory? You tell me. Who will actually own it? Who will also verify it? Who will secure it? Now, this is what most people are missing, because most blockchain projects are just trying to become financial networks. Some are also attempting to become data layers. There are also other networks that are positioning themselves also as computation layers. But the internet computer appears to be pursuing something much, much larger. Much larger. We're talking a complete decentralized infrastructure stack. An infrastructure stack capable of hosting, governing, securing, executing, auditing, and preserving the next generation of intelligent application. And this distinction matters massively here, because infrastructure markets are often significantly larger than application markets by millions of magnitude. And if that vision proves correct, the market may eventually be forced to evaluate ICP completely different than what it is looked at today. Not as a mere cryptocurrency, no, but as core infrastructure. And this is key here. This is absolutely paramount, because to understand why this matters a lot, we need to step back, way back. In the Roman Empire, one of the most powerful advantages Rome possessed wasn't simply its military. When we go back on a bit of Italian history, it was infrastructure. We're talking roads, aqueducts, we're talking communication networks, administrative systems. These systems allowed Rome to govern vast territories more effectively than its competitors. Because think about it, the roads themselves weren't the final product, not at all, but they enabled everything else. Think about it. They enabled trade, military logistics. What else they enabled? They enabled economic growth. They also enabled political coordination. So think about it. The infrastructure created the conditions for the scale, for the infinite scale. And throughout history, infrastructure has often generated more lasting value than the actual applications built on top of it. Because today, cloud infrastructure plays quite a similar role. Think about it. Modern economies run on digital roads. What do they run on? Digital communication systems. What else do they run on? Digital storage networks, digital compute infrastructure. But the question is here today is whether the next generation of infrastructure will remain centralized. That's a key here, or whether the new models will emerge. And that's where the internet computer enters the discussion. It's very important here, because I can tell you that the key thing here is, and it's very, 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 very paramount and important, is that to start with a simple fact that's important is that cloud computing has become one of the most concentrated industries on planet Earth by far. We're talking a small group of companies dominates global cloud infrastructure completely. We're talking Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. They are the predominant players with the majority of the market share. Together, they power enormous portions of the modern economy. Think about it. That governments depend on them. Fortune 500 companies, corporations, all depend on them. Banks, institutions all depend on them. Healthcare systems that we use today, they all depend on them. And our companies also too depend on them. So we had software developers also depend on them too. The whole thing depends on them. The scale is very difficult to comprehend. And this creates a challenge for every decentralized project here. And I tell you why. How do you convince organizations today to abandon infrastructure they've spent decades building around? They've been decades building around this. The answer is simple. You don't. You don't. At least not initially. And this is where the ICP strategy becomes increasingly interesting. Most people don't see it because instead of demanding replacement at the core, it actually focuses on integration. And that distinction could be critical over the long term. Historically, technologies that reduce switching costs often achieve adoption faster than technologies requiring complete migration. It's always been the case. Organizations rarely embrace radical change overnight. They just prefer incremental transitions. Familiar systems, minimal disruption, lower risk. It's simple. And Cloud Engines is designed around that reality at its core. And that changes the conversation completely here. And I'll tell you why it completely changes that conversation. It's very important to actually dissect the facts because many observers initially viewed the emergence of Cloud Engines with skepticism. Sure, particularly when discussions began involving infrastructure providers like AWS. The criticism, it sounded straightforward. If decentralization is the goal, why involve centralized cloud providers at all? Why do we need them? At first glance, the criticism sounds reasonable, sure. But here's where it gets interesting. Cloud engines do not necessarily make internet computer dependent on AWS because the blockchain remains ICP at the core. Consensus remains ICP at the core. Also, governance remains ICP2 at the core, and but the cryptographic guarantees also remain ICP at the core, the same as execution. But what changes is the actual deployment flexibility in all this. And for enterprises, flexibility often determines mass adoption. There's no two ways about that. Large organizations, they operate under constraints. That's where most masses don't understand compliance requirements, regulatory obligations, office internal governance procedures, and obviously risk management frameworks. And that's more specialization. And most people don't see that. And also, the technology decisions are really based only on technical superiority. They're based on organizational practicality. That is key here. This is one of the most important lessons in technology history. Because I can tell you, the best technology doesn't always win. No, not at all. The technology that integrates most effectively often does. It's not the best technology. The one that's able to integrate seamlessly and effectively. Remember that line for the next years to come. Cloud engines may significantly reduce adoption friction by allowing organizations to access blockchain native capabilities without completely abandoning existing infrastructure environments. And that could become a major advantage towards mass adoption that everyone is visioning. Now let's zoom out again, okay? Because artificial intelligence, yes, it is completely reshaping the technological landscape under our feet. There's no two ways about that. And now introduces entirely new infrastructure requirements too. We're talking ownership, governance, also talking about transparency, security, auditability too, memory. Let's think about identity also. These issues become increasingly important. Trust verification as our systems gain more responsibility. Consider ownership. Who owns an AI model? Think about it. Question it. Who owns the outputs to the AI? Question that. Who owns accumulated trading history? Question that too. And who owns evolving intelligence? Because today ownership is often just concentrated within a few hands of the centralized platforms. And this creates obvious risks because where control becomes centralized, which it is, decision making also becomes completely centralized. And also value capture becomes completely centralized. An internet computer offers a different framework at the core because applications can be governed through actual decentralized mechanisms. Canisters can be controlled by organizations, communities, or even predefined governance systems. And that creates alternative ownership structures, which is fundamental. Because as AI becomes more and more economically important, ownership structures they will become increasingly valuable too. There's no two ways about that. No two ways about that. At the core, definitely more valuable. Just people are just not seeing how that framework is going to play out as AI will evolve, and it's evolving very, very, very fast. As AI systems evolve, they will increasingly influence critical decision making, very big decisions, financial transactions. We're talking about also key supply chain management. We're talking major healthcare operations. We're talking about national infrastructure, government systems, defense applications. The stakes continue rising. And this is massive here. And do you know why? They pulled down Anthropic's model. Most people don't know why. Because Anthropic's new model was so sophisticated that in several hours, it was able to hack core government infrastructure, the NSA. As these models become more and more sophisticated, the current systems are going to get compromised. And as the stakes rise, security is going to become important. It's going to become apparent. It's going to be ignored until it can't be ignored. Because traditional cloud environments, they often depend heavily on trust in the operators. But as AI gets more sophisticated, that trust gets lost. Trust in internal processes. Internet computer introduces a different model completely. Cryptographic verification, tamper-resistant execution, auditable behavior, verifiable outcomes. And now this is what most people miss. For many institutions, blockchain's most valuable feature may not be speculation. It may be verifiability, the ability to prove what happened, the ability to verify execution, and the ability to audit decisions. And this is where I believe ICP will get its mass adoption. The ability to be the trust verifiable layer of the hybrid model internet. That's going to also be a verifiable trust layer to AI and cloud. As these models will get more and more sophisticated, will get to a point where it cannot be ignored. In an AI-driven world, which we are going at full speed, those capabilities become increasingly important. They'll be paramount. It'll get to a point where it cannot be ignored. It's just a matter of time and patience. Because one of the most underappreciated aspects of the internet computer may be orthogonal persistence. As most people don't know, the term sounds technical. It is, but the implications are very significant here. Because think about it, traditional software systems separate the multiple components. They separate application logic, databases, storage systems, state management. Developers spend enormous effort maintaining synchronization between these layers. What happens? Complexity grows, costs rise. Obviously, the more happens, risks increase. AI systems amplify this challenge exponentially because memory is central to intelligence. Think about it. Because without memory, what happens? Intelligence becomes fragmented. Yet I'm telling you, most architectures still treat memory as external infrastructure. But the internet computer takes a totally different approach to all of this, completely different, because code and state persist together. Memory remains integrated, and also state also survives upgrades too at the same time, where context remains also available. And this may sound like a technical detail to us, but infrastructure innovations often appear insignificant before their broader implications become so obvious. And for autonomous AI systems, persistent memory may become extraordinarily important and a necessity at the core. There's no two ways about that. It's just a matter of time, and I'll explain why. A useful historical example comes from the Industrial Revolution. We're going to go way back when the railroads expanded across the United States during the 19th century. We're going way back. Many investors, they focused on individual businesses, the factories, the merchants, the commodity producers. But over time, the rail networks themselves became transformative infrastructure. The tracks that connected also everything. Goods, then what happened? Moved faster. Markets were able to expand, and economic activity and GDP accelerated too. Because railroad wasn't simply just another business, not at all. It became the actual platform upon which countless businesses actually operated. And the reason this matters today, and it's very important, is because infrastructure often captures value indirectly, not through just a single application, not at all, but through enabling entire ecosystems. We're talking entire ecosystems. The key question investors are asking about ICP is remarkably similar. Is it merely another simple application layer, or is it infrastructure capable of supporting entire ecosystems? And that distinction will determine long-term outcomes here. There's no two ways about that. No two ways about that. And that's where people are missing the long-term bigger picture, because the real shift came when artificial intelligence began moving beyond just simple assistance. Increasingly, AI agents can perform tasks independently. Agents can also optimize workflows, generate software, analyze systems. The agents can also improve operations, and eventually they may modify applications, and they will modify those applications themselves. And this introduces other new challenges that are massive here, because traditional architectures struggle with continuous modification. It's difficult because every change introduces potential synchronization problems and also risk security problems. The database issues, state management risks we can look at, also storage problems, complications could also arise. Internet computers architecture may and will reduce a lot of those challenges because of persistent state remains integrated. Applications retain the context, and systems can also evolve while maintaining continuity. And this could eventually support self-improving software. This is very key here, because some analysts suggest this could become one of the most significant long-term opportunities for blockchain native decentralized computing environments. The future remains uncertain, I know, but the direction of travel is increasingly crystal clear here, because software is becoming more and more autonomous. There's no two ways about that. And infrastructure must adapt accordingly. And that's where ICP has the niche to be able to run that true decentralized compute architecture, or that hybrid approach. Because another challenge emerges also as AI capabilities advance, and they're advancing at breakneck speed. Identity. How do we distinguish humans from machines? How do we prevent fraud? How do we prevent fraud? How can we verify? Is that real or not real? How do we prevent manipulation? How are we going to prevent governance attacks from centralized systems, deep fakes, cyber attacks, automated influence campaigns? How are you going to deter if it's real or not? These problems will continue expanding. Internet identity attempts to address this issue through native identity infrastructure, which ICP. Instead of relying exclusively on third-party services, identity becomes part of the architecture itself. So you have the identity layer, you have the verification layer, you have the trust layer, you have the secure decentralized compute layer, all on stack, where it cannot be compromised at any point of that chain. There is no single point of attack. And that's what makes it increasingly valuable. And there's no Web3 core infrastructure that can do this, particularly for governments. Why do you think Pakistan and Switzerland are adopting ICP? It was a scam coin. Pakistan and Switzerland will not be adopting it. We're talking governments, we're talking sovereigns. You know, they're financial institutions, healthcare systems, enterprise environments where accountability matters, because trust becomes difficult when identity is uncertain. Think about it. And trust remains essential for mass adoption. Essential. Trust and verification is everything for mass adoption. If we don't have that, we're not going anywhere. And that's at the core of ICP. Think of today's AI's ecosystems like a medieval trade route. Think about it. Medieval trade routes, merchants could move goods across vast distances. But every transfer introduced uncertainty. That's the problem. Verification was difficult. Trust was fragmented. Risk also was everywhere. And modern AI faces a very, very similar major challenge. Information moves more and more rapidly. Decisions occur automatically, but verification often remains weak. But Intercomputer has built a digital trust infrastructure in the same way standardized trade systems eventually improved commerce centuries, years ago. Now, not by eliminating the actual activity, not at all, but what it did is improving the confidence within it. And confidence also drives adoption. It's just a matter of time before that happens, because the verifiability and trust will be needed in the ever expanding phase of AI dominance within the economy, because increasingly some new developers view canisters as a compelling execution environment for intelligent applications. It's true, but why? Why is that the case? Because they combine multiple functions within a single architecture. Think about it. We're talking compute, we're talking storage, we're talking memory, we're talking governance, we're talking security, and also identity, and also persistence, which is important because most modern software stacks, they rely on numerous external services where each service introduces complexity, additional costs, additional latency, additional attack vectors also. By canisters, they consolidate many of these functions, and that simplification will become increasingly valuable as AI applications grow more and more sophisticated, and infrastructure simplicity often scales better than infrastructure complexity. That is very, 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 very key here, because we need that verifiable trust layer in an era of autonomous AI, where AI is accelerating at breakneck speed. Cybercrime will only grow more exponential without these trust layers. And cloud engines may also unlock another opportunity in all this government adoption. Think about it. Many governments, they do require strict controls at their core. We're talking data sovereignty, regulatory, also compliance. No two ways about that. They also require geographic restrictions, operational customization, because traditional decentralized infrastructure, sometimes it struggles with these requirements. You know why? Because it's difficult, but cloud engines creates a flexibility while preserving blockchain level functionality. And that could dramatically, and I mean dramatically, expand ICP's addressable market by leaps and bounds. Governments, defense organizations, we're talking about healthcare systems, we're talking about major financial institutions, national AI initiatives, we're talking sovereign cloud projects. That these represent enormous, I'm talking enormous infrastructure markets. And many of them are actively already searching for more resilient digital systems. This is very important here because it's just, people just don't see it until it becomes obvious. It's too late. And that's always been the case when it comes to core infrastructure investments. And I explain to you why here. And also this, consider the transition also, from sailing ships to steamships. This is very important. I give an example. For years, both systems coexisted. Businesses did not immediately abandon existing infrastructure. They never do. That's why it takes time. They gradually integrated new technologies while maintaining operational continuity. That's why people will keep complaining of when's mass adoption going to come? Why is the price not going to do nothing? Because it takes time. And time. It's not something that's going to happen over the next week. It's not something that's going to happen next month. It's not going to happen in the next few months. It's going to take time. But cloud engines will represent a similar transition to all this. Not an immediate replacement of traditional cloud. Not at all. Not at all. But an actual bridge between old systems and emerging architectures. Because mass adoption often occurs through integration before replacement. And history repeatedly has demonstrated this pattern over and over again. I always read my history books. And sometimes it's happened a different way, but it always repeated the same rhyme. Because one frequent debate is token burn. I can tell you that. Current burn metrics remain relatively modest on the IC. Critics point to this as evidence of limited adoption. I understand. Also, supporters, they can argue the opposite because we focus on future infrastructure demand. And this distinction is important. Is that going to happen? Because short-term noise, long-term structure. Because if cloud engine successfully onboards institutional workloads, demand for compute, just think about demand for compute, storage, and execution cycles will increase significantly. There's no two ways about that because greater utilization will generate greater economic activity. And whether that happens remains uncertain. Okay, what I could say. But infrastructure investing has always been about future usage rather than current usage. That's why it's just going to take time. And the key question is not today's burn rate, not at all. Who cares about that? The question is whether the infrastructure actually solves real core problems. And investors continue debating that issue. But we know that the core problem it's solving for is trust and verification of AI. And that is a multi hundreds of billions, trillion-dollar problem that will await the future of AI as these models get more sophisticated and we move to the AI autonomous agentic future. Because the global environment, it's becoming increasingly complex. Cyber attacks are increasing at breakneck speeds. They're growing exponential. Infrastructure attacks are increasing. Digital sovereignty is becoming a national security priority. No two ways about that. Governments increasingly recognize that digital infrastructure has become strategic infrastructure. And strategic infrastructure, guys, requires resilience at the core, portability, security, trust, verification, and operational control through the whole chain. And cloud engines potentially aligns with these factors, and it does, because it offers a path forward for enhanced infrastructure capabilities without requiring organizations to completely abandon their existing investments. And that proposition will most likely become increasingly attractive. Amazon's already piloting it with their AWS centers. Why is that for? Because they see the value of protection. And that is what's paramount, especially after this war in the Middle East and the hits on their AWS centers in Bahrain, their outages, because every technology product we see is a similar life cycle. At first, progress appears slow. Okay, sure. Infrastructure develops. Developers arrive. I get it. Applications emerge. Yes. Institutions begin experimenting. It's a normal process, but the network's effects accelerate. But here's where it gets very interesting in all this. The actual tipping point. It often appears obvious early in hindsight. Before adoption accelerates, what happens? Skepticism dominates. People question, but uncertainty dominates. The same pattern has appeared repeatedly throughout technological history. It did it with Amazon. The key issue for internet computers is whether cloud engines, AI integration, identity infrastructure, canisters, and orthogonal persistence collectively create sufficient value to trigger broader mass adoption. No one knows for certain, but investors like us, we have been watching it very closely, because when network effects, as they have, begin to compound, perceptions can change very quickly because price is reacting, system is evolving. And those who are not always there, it's not always the same thing. And this is very important here, because why? Why is it going to get mass adoption? Because it will be necessity forced mass adoption for the verification trust issues that will be coming from the current systems. Because we step back and examine the broader picture here, a different narrative begins to emerge. The internet computer may not simply be another blockchain competing for market share. Not at all. Not at all. It is attempting to become a foundational infrastructure layer for the artificial intelligence era. And cloud engines will create a bridge to enterprise adoption. Canisters provide integrated execution environments. Orthogonal persistence addresses also the memory challenges. And internet identity tackles trust and verification problems at the core, and cryptographic execution enhances security and auditability. And with AI increasingly creates demand for precisely these capabilities. It's very, very important, because as these new models come out, they are going to compromise the trust and verification layers of the current Web2 stack. Autonomous agents, we're talking the agentic future of AI is becoming more sophisticated, and you will need these trust decentralized layers of ICP to be able to protect the infrastructure of what we currently will have to get through once Web 2 gets more and more compromised to a point where it's just not savable. That's the whole point about it, because nothing's stopping AI. Meanwhile, the infrastructure story continues developing beneath the surface. It's developing. But the thing is, the infrastructure story will continue gaining momentum because AI will just keep building. Investors may be eventually forced to evaluate internet computer through a completely different lens. And that will happen when AI will get out of control. And they won't see it as a cryptocurrency, but as core infrastructure to AI. And perhaps the most important question is not longer whether mass adoption is possible. The more important question will be maybe the timing, because the internet computer successfully positions itself as it's working at the intersection of cloud computing, artificial intelligence, identity, governance, and decentralized infrastructure at the core, positioning itself to be part of the agentic, autonomous AI future. The significance of what it can do at the enterprise level, at the government level, and for the future architecture of the internet itself will be enormous. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts on ICP and the future of AI infrastructure, and share this video there's someone who still thinks blockchain is only about finance. Because at the end of the day, it's all about AI infrastructure, where it's going. Because the biggest shifts in technology often begin long before the majority of people notice them. And those shifts are worth paying attention to. And remember to stay decentralized. And I will see you on the internet computer. Until next time.